Good morning. We have today Dun and Dalit. Sorry, Naham and Aleph, but we're starting on the Dalit on the base. We're at towards the end, but before we sort of go much more into it, I want to just mention a couple of things that we didn't have a chance to discuss yesterday. So where we started out was the last part of the Gemara that we started yesterday was Amar Rabbi Yehuda Baruch Garmel Chasadim Tovim. So the Gra brings down here the gears of the Rif that is different than Baruch Garmel Chasadim Tovim, closer to what we say, namely that the person says Baruch Hashem Kamel Garmel Chasadim Tovim Shag Milani Kol Tov, and then we say the response, right? Mishak Kol Tov Kol Sela. That's the situation with a person who goes through these Abraham Tzrichin Lahaydes, these four people that go along, that they have to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom, and they have to say the bracha of Hagoyma. Now, this bracha of Hagoyma, we say it comes up in four situations. Abraham Tzrichin Lahaydes. One of them is Yerdi Hayam. One of them is Hochem in Barais. Right. One of them is Misha Hayachel v'Nitzrape. Misha Hayachavish B'Veis HaSurim. So if you look in Archaim in Reish Test, so you see there is a fundamental machlokes between the Sephardim and Ashkenazim as to the degree of sakana, the degree of seriousness in the situation. The Sephardim are more willing to say the bracha of Hagoymel than the Ashkenazim are. So the nice place to see the opening of this sugya is the Gemara. It's Rabbeinu Yonah. I apologize. In my Rabbeinu Yonah, it is, I think, Amud Gimel Amud Aleph. Yeah, Amud Gimel Amud Aleph. And the Divrei Maschil Arba Tzrichin Lahaydos. And so the Rabbeinu Yonah says, halfway through, he says, Uminig hu b'tzarfas. It's a minig in France. She'ena mevarchim berachas hagoymel kishahalchem me'ir le'ir. They don't make the bracha of hagoymel when they simply travel from city to city. Because they don't have to thank Hashem except for those that are going in the desert. Because there you have sakana from Chayes Rosh Melistim when you go in the desert. It's simply going on the highway, even if it's a big distance between the two cities, it's not really dangerous. It says that all roads have a cheskas sakana. Nevertheless, they're only saying that with regards to those that are going out on the road. Because a person's always supposed to say Tfilas Derech when he goes out on the road. It's not a question of only if you go to a midbar. Anytime you go on a big drive, you should say Tfilas Derech. So in other words, there's a distinction between when you say Tfilas Derech and when you say Agaymo. Tfilas Derech, you say whenever you go on a big journey, right? The Gemara that we had earlier on when we discussed the whole sugi of Tfilas Derech. I think it was by Mem. Right? The Gemara told us. The Gemara told us that if you go back to Mem Amud Aleph, so over there, the Gemara says that what was the sugya? The sugya was, I'm not finding it right now, but the Gemara told us there that you have when you go out onto the road, you have to make a bracha for Tfilas Haderech. But that bracha for Tfilas Haderech is not the same thing as when you have to make the bracha of Hagoymel. The bracha of Hagoymel you make when you go to a situation of a sakana, according to the Ben Yonah, and the bracha of Hagoymel you make whenever you go out on the road. The Sephardim don't pass like that. The Sephardim pass that you do say Hagoymel even if it's not a situation where it's all that serious. But the Rama tries to limit it to what the Rabbeinu Yonah says, which is to a situation of seriousness. So it comes up. Then as a practical matter, what about when you travel on an airplane? So Moshe writes, Moshe writes in Negus Moshe in Arachaim, Chelik Beis Siman and Tasi, where Moshe writes that he thinks that an airplane you for sure have to say Hagoymel because even if an airplane is not going beyam, and if it's not going in a midbar, it's essentially like that. And it's very dangerous because if you lose an engine or you lose whatever, it's like it's catastrophic, it's fatal. So he says that for sure you have to stay, even according to the Ramah, even though a lot of people are traveling on airplanes. However, that's, of course, written 50 plus years ago. Nowadays, some Mars want to distinguish between traveling over the land versus traveling over the ocean. And then even today, that there are those that are make even not to say or machmer on Suffolk brachas. We go Suffolk brachas. When we say that, what does that mean? Suffolk brachas lakula, in the sense that you're not making the bracha, you're not wasting a bracha. Some people want to say that you really shouldn't be making these brachas unless you have a real situation on a plane. But air travel today is frankly safer than car travel. Maybe not. We saw yesterday the mice and LaGuardia, but as a general matter, while an air accident gets a ton of news, as a percentage, it's tiny compared to car accident. And so, for those that want to suggest that maybe really you don't need to stay Hagoyim, even on plane travel. Um, okay, so that is part one. Part two. Abaya says the next line of the Gemara is Abaya Amr Tzarech Laduya Kamei Asara. Abaya says you have to have 10 people there. Why? You have to have 10 people there because the pasuk says what does this mean? There's 10 people. Is this like a minion? Is that what we're talking about? Are you able to be a part of the minion? Right, the person has to make a grandma. You're able to be a part of the minion. So you look at the Ber Heitev over there. Ber Heitev brings down two opinions whether you're able to be a part of this minion or not. But this is a very odd minion. It's not a typical minion because look at the next line of the Gemara. Two of the people of the minion have to be from the rabbis. The Gemara ends up saying, well, does it have to be two people part of the minion? Maybe it's to be two separate rabbis who are there. And the Gemara ends up saying, no, it says doesn't say B'kal Zakanim. The two people who are Talmidei Chacham should be a part of the 10. In fact, that's brought down la halacha. But ideally, when you have this requirement, say, and we should have a minion, and you should have two people that are there that are Talmidei Chachamim. So this idea clearly shows us that it's not a normal minion by definition. A normal minion, you don't have to have Talmidei Chachamim, right? So it's not a minion like you have for Shachos. Remember, we had the Gemaras before, right? We had the Gemaras. What was it? Amem Zion, right? The Gemaras told us about mitzdarfen, right? Can you mitzdarfen Isha? Can you mitzdarfen Kohen? Can you mitzdarfen Torah? Can you all the things that you can mitzdarfen or not mitzdarfen by the situation of minion? We ended up asking, or at least we worked on the Mordechai, with the Ben Simcha, maybe Shas Chag. We talked about the Taisus, says you really shouldn't be mitzdarfen. But be it as it may, a regular minion doesn't require people to be the Chacham. You just require 10 people. Here we're requiring 10, and we're requiring 2 of them to be the Chachamim, ideally, which tells you that it's not a typical minion. And so the question then becomes, what about including a woman in this minion? Right, a woman included here, she able to starve over here. What about by Kiddush Hashem? The Gemara told us in Sanhedrin Ayin Daled that by Esther's B'Farhes, the question was, what does B'Farhes mean? What does it mean in terms of people? And over there, the discussion is that a minion, with regards to Kiddush Hashem, is not a minion of 10 males that you use for chakras. The minion of 10 Jews, 10 adult Jews, that would be considered a minion. Maybe a woman could be included in that. And maybe the same would be true over here, which leads us to the next question, which is, what about a woman making Haggai? Well, and all that, the Mishnah Berurah says, oh, maybe a woman shouldn't do Haggai, that's not the custom. Says maybe the husband makes it for her, get a gufay. And then there are women who do make the bracha of Haggai, and they want to have a minion. Because obviously a situation, if we understand that these arbot tzrichim lahaitais are not situations of dafka. In other words, other situations as well, like an airplane. An airplane is not one of the four, but we can consider it similar enough that it's related to it. So a woman who, let's say, going through childbirth, we're going to see in other cases later on about this today. So that's kind of, and she has not a typical childbirth. Obviously, all childbirth is a sakana. But let's say this is a serious sakana situation, which is not the typical sakana situation. So wants to say Haggaim after that. She able to, she not able to. You need a minion, you not need a minion. These will all be relevant to this topic. But there are those who take each one of these opinions. They say a woman should say Berachas Haggaim, a woman shouldn't say Berachas Haggaim, a woman could have her husband say Berachas Haggaim before her. Fine. There is a potentially another solution on the basis of what the Gemara says next, which we didn't have a chance to do yesterday, which we'll do now. Okay, so where we're up to yesterday was the Gemara asked the question, maybe you should have a minion of rabbis, not just a regular minion. The Gemara says, no, miksiv b'kahal zaken b'kahal amksiv. Then the Gemara says, be'asara, maybe you should have the two people be extra to the 10, right? So the Gemara said, maybe you should have 10 of regulars and 2 of the rabbis. The Gemara says, kasha, we'll leave that on the side, maybe, maybe not. But in the end, we don't require that. As I said, practically, we require 10 people, and 2 of them should be Talmid Chacham. That's what we got to yesterday. Now we're up to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda chalash. So Rabbi Yehuda got ill. The isbach. Ola gabi Rav Chana Bagdisa. So Rabbi Yehuda got ill, and Rabbi Chana Bagdisa came to visit him. For those who are here on Sunday or listen to the Sunday class, you know that we literally just discussed Rabbi Chana Bagdisa. The Gemara appears about him in Ksuba Zion of base. Over there, Rashi brings down Rabbeinu Shira Gaon. So since our topic was Rabbeinu Shira Gaon Zigeres, so it's very cute that we get to it twice in the same week. And Chana Bagdasa he was from Baghdad, which was the big city in Bavel at the time, still the big city in Iraq today. So Chana came to visit him, the Rabbanan, along with the rabbis. So Amrile, they said to Rav Yehuda, who was ill, Rich Rachmana, Yavich Nelech, Lo Yavich La'afra. Hashem should bless you, they should become better, and you shouldn't. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yehuda was ill, he got better. Rav Chana Bagdasa, the Rabbanan, came to him and they visited him. And they said, oh, blessed is Hashem who made you better, and didn't bring you into the ground, meaning they thanked Hashem that he had gotten over the sickness. So Amalu, Rabbi Yehuda then responded to him and said, Patrusan Yasi Mila'iduye. Oh, you pater me from having to make the bracha of Haggaima. So Amar Abaya, read the Gemara, but Abaya doesn't Abaya say, Boy, do Ba'api Astara. Didn't Abaya say you have to have 10 people there? So the Gemara says, the Havi Asar, when Rav Chana Bagdasa came to visit, he came with 10 people. But you like but he didn't say the bracha. So the Gemara says, Lo Tzarech Dani Basrai Amen. He doesn't have to because he answered Amen. So a couple of points. One, as I just mentioned, as it relates to the woman, maybe, one of the possible solutions for those that don't want to have a woman make the bracha in front of men would be, I think the Mishnah writes, Lava Arch Arach. It's not a normal thing to do. The one possibility is have the husband or somebody else make the bracha. She could say Amen. As you see, if somebody says Amen to your bracha, it's not an issue. That's number one. Number two, right? We just had a Gemara. You remember the Gemara on Nun we had the Gemara Nun Gimel and base. The Gemara told us there was a machlokes. Is it better Hamavarch Adif Manda Ani Amen, or is it Gadol Aina Amen Yosef and Hamavarch? Right? Who's greater, the Mavarch or the Aina Amen? And the Gemara ended up saying Tanai. It's a machlokes. The machlokes Tanai, if it's greater to make the bracha or greater to say Amen. So what you see over here is a situation where a person, Rav Yehuda, was ready to make the bracha of Haggaima. They said bracha Chmana. And he said, I was Yertzstein, meaning that he felt it's not worse. That somebody says Amen is not worse than somebody who says the bracha. Therefore, he was content to be Yertzstein with the Amen that he said, and they made the bracha. Good? A third point. Notice the language that they said, Brich Rachamana Diyav Nelech, right? They said, blessed is their Ben Shalom who has, brought you back from your sickness. Now, obviously, he was ill, whatever, significantly ill. So you remember we had a Gemara before on Mem Base, right? We had a Gemara before Mem Base about Binyamin Raya, Binyamin the shepherd who was eating bread, and he said, Baruch Mari the High Pita, blessed as Hashem, right? The owner of this bread. So Rav says it was Yaitza. The Gemara asks, how could Rav say it was Yaitza? It didn't have Haskaras Hashem. If you have to have Haskaras Hashem and Malchus in order to be considered a bracha. According to Rav. Right, you have to have Haskaras Hashem. According to Rabbi Yechon, not just to have Haskaras Hashem, you have to have Moshe and Malchus. You have to have Malchus also to be considered a bracha. So the Gemara said, no. What Binyamin Raya said was the Amar Brich Rachmana Mari Lahai Pita. The blessed is Hashem, the owner of the bread. In other words, and it was Yertzah on the first bracha of Brachas Hamazon. Why? According to Rav, because he had the bracha of shame. He had bracha achmana. Right, that's baruch atah Hashem. So over here as well, so you're able to be Yitzzayin with the bracha bracha achmana diyov nelech v'lo yaven la'afar. So he was Yitzzayin. Then he had to point out, but one second. Where's the malchus? I don't know if he has to be Yitzzayin according to Rabbi Yochanan here. Maybe we're going with Rav. But obviously, if we're going with Rabbi Yochanan, we would have to answer. Said he said something else. La'olam, it was Melech la'olam or something like that. Malka da'olam, you would have to say something as well in order to get in malchus. But for Rav, who says you need to have shame, so you have Brech Rachmana, you already have the shame, so you'll be Yitzzayin. Okay. I think that covers our two dots. So now we have another line. Each one of these lines you can spend a day on. Yeah. So Amar Abu Dashlosh Tzrichim Shimur. Three people need to be watched. An ill person and a chas and kala. Rashi tells us why the chas and kala have to be watched. Rashi tells us that. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we get to this one, I forgot the Taisus. Taisus says the envy asar cher abundant. So Taisus says, what about the what do we do actually? Taisus says, "And I go we make the bracha of Agayim after you laning." The dafke b'chel shenafel lamita. It says, remember Rabbeinu Yonah. This is the sheet of the Ashkenaz, the Ramah. Only if you really got sick that you were in bed, mom, she couldn't get out of bed, kind of sick, like that kind of level. If somebody has stomach problems, somebody has headaches, but he's not like mom's confined to the bed, like confined to the hospital, like that. You don't make a right. So again, that goes back to Rabbeinu Yonah. Fine. And Petrosin Yasim Laduyes or Rabbi Yehuda says, "Oh, shkach, he made the bracha for me. I'm done." So for time for Amin and bracha and malchus and a bracha. Again, what I just mentioned from Rabbeinu Yonah, tries to ask, "Where's the malchus?" Yeshlam Rabbi Yehuda, I'm telling me the Rav. Right, Rav Yehuda, we know Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda was the Talmud of both Rav and Shmuel. So maybe he felt that you can go with Rav, and therefore you don't need to let me in Allah Skaras Hashem. So you were okay with Brech Rachmana, right? Okay. So back to our Huda. So Rav Yehuda, another line from Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda told us that we say, right. By the way, the whole line of Rav Yehuda of Abba Tzrichim Lahidus, looking back at the Gemara, was Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. So I should have mentioned that. The whole sugya of Abba Tzrichim Lahidus of Rav. He wasn't saying B'Shem Shmuel. So maybe he went with Rav all the way on the sugya. Fine, right? Because then we have the whole thing comes out of L'Shitase. Abba Tzrichim Lahidus, and then Rav Yehuda himself got sick and got better. And he said, and he was yet to sound with the Amin and Brach Achman. It comes out, the whole thing goes very nicely. It's Rav Shita. I didn't think of that before. Okay, fine. Continues the Gemara. I'm Rabbi Yehuda Amar. So now we don't have Rabbi Yehuda Amar. Now we just have Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shlosh Tzrich and Shimon, three people need to be watched. Veilu and Chayla Chasam V'Kala. So why do they have to be watched? Rashi tells us, Chayla Sheireh Mazolei, right? He's in a bad situation. He's a bad mazal. Fikach Hashed Mizgarabai. He has shade messing around with him. V'chein Chaya Isha Sheyolda. What's a Chaya? Is a woman who gives birth. We haven't gotten to that. We'll see in a second. Fine. So what's the vart? The vart is you have the shadim messing around with your mazel is bad. In other words, you know how they say don't hit somebody when he's down? That's not how the shadim work. The shadim, they go after you when you're down. So since a chayla is down, so they're going to come after you. Rashi says you need shimur min mazikin. You need the mazikin are coming after you when you are down. That's why it makes sense to watch out for the shadim. So you can understand. Rashi puts together, shimur ben hamazikin. You have the chayla who's hayrei masalik because it's a bad situation. You have the chaya, right, the woman who gave birth, right. So she's weak in state. So again, that's a situation where you have, right. We have what do you call? We have the shade of mazikin, to be worried about. I don't know, specifically why we would grab onto the situation of, why would we need a situation of a chaya? The Mishnah tells us in Shabbos, "Al shalosh averis nashim mesas b'shas leidas, and hashem and ziris b'nidu b'chalav ad logas aner." In other words, b'shas leida, there's a situation where the sudden is makatrig and you have a dangerous situation. So why do you have to go to a chaya? Why don't you say mishas leida? I'm not 100% sure. And so then the question becomes on Rashi and Avil is also we can state lost a family member, etc. So the sudden the mazikin, they're mekatrig in these kind of situations. But what about a chas and kala? Where's the Hiram Azali over there? Where's the them down that you're now beating them up? So look at Rashi. Rashi says chas and kala to necham. Rashi is changing up the whole Gemara around, putting in different ones that connect more to each other. So Rashi says mikin asay misgar b'hem, from his jealousy, right? The Shadim, the Mazikim are jealous of the Chas and Kal. They see them happy, they're jealous of them, so that's why they're starting out with them. So that's what they need Shimur. But you notice that there's a different reason, right? On the reason of the Aval, on the reason of the Chaya, another reason of the what do you call it, the Chayla. These are all people that are down. So the Shadim are going after somebody when they're down. But on the situation of the Chasan and Kala, the situation of Hamachach, they're not down. So why are they Shadim susceptible to Mazikim? Because of the fact that they're jealous. The Shadim are jealous of the Tamachal. They're jealous of the Chazal. That's one approach. Rabbi Yen is a different approach. Rabbi Yen says, Satan Mekadreg, everyone knows about the Satan Mekadreg. When? What's the line? The Satan Mekadreg B'Shas Sakana. Right? Look at the Gemara in Shabbos, Amud Beis. The Gemara there tells us that they're very careful when they're going to the ferry and the here, that there are different situations. Because Satan Mekadreg B'Shas Sakana. The pasuk tells us by Yosef, right, that there's a dangerous situation when you go on the road. Suddenly, but Arminian says something very different. It doesn't just say Satan That would explain what? That would explain the Chayla. That would explain the Chaya. That would explain the Aval. Maybe all these situations are situations of Stakana. Okay. But what about the Chas and Kala? What about the Talmud Chacham? Says the Rabbeinu Yonah, Shas Soter Mekadri B'Shas HaSakana U'B'Shas HaSimcha. Whenever there's a situation, whether it's happy or sad, but it's not the norm, it's not the regular, then the subject is Mekadri. So in other words, you have to be on all guard when things are going well, when things are going bad. When things are regular, that's fine. But out of the norm is when the subject gets waken up. And so therefore now it comes out, this Gemara then becomes a source for those who have these menhagim. I consider them nichush. They're definitely dark Yamari. But nevertheless, you have to have sort of keep it up aim. So I had these challenges when I was going to my chuppah, and my grandmother was like dumping in rice and salt, and I don't know, she was putting in things on and my mother's like, and I'm like, none of this is Judaism. This is mamash all contrary to everything. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, but there's a mitzvah of keep it up aim, and there's maybe Rabbeinu Yonah you can rely on, but like ultimately at the end of the day, it's this Judaism. You go into your chuppah and you're doing things that are mamish not okay. Fine, you can rely on the Rabbeinu Yonah as a source. Then the subject is mekatri b'shas simcha, or maybe it's not. Maybe getting married, it's not a good situation. Maybe you go into your own death, and therefore it's perfect. Okay, that's the other way to look at it. But pashtus, this would be then the source to understand where you could have a smach to do some of these minhagim that are not the normative ones, because of the fact that sudden mekatri even b'shas simcha. Finish the Gemara. So the Gemara had again put these together, not in the way that Rashi did. So first it says Shimur, the three that need Shimur is what? The Chayla, the Chas and Kala. Then Masnisa time we learned in the Brisa, Chayla, Chaya, Chas and Kala. So we added in one, Chaya, the woman who gave birth. Again, as I pointed out, why is it giving birth? Why not? It's why is the woman who gave birth? It should be giving birth, right? Because we said Ashlosh Devar, right? A woman is b'shas later could die. And then we have another opinion. Af avel, even avel. Even at night. Now, you remember the Gemara we had before. We had before Gemara Mem Gimel and Beis. Right, the Gemara told us about Vav Devarim. Right, we said there were Shish Devarim Gnayla Talmid Chacham. 6 things were negative for Talmid Chacham. One of them was you shouldn't go with Vusim L'Shuk. The Al Yetze Yechidi Balayla. You can't go out alone at night. A woman, you can't go out alone at night. So the Gemara ended up explaining Mishum Chashada, right? Because there's a Chashad of Nus. Why is he going out at night? Right? You remember the Gemara Gimel and Beis? We talked about Mishum Chashad, Mapilis, Mazikim, right all the way back. So here, when we're saying that Yeshem after Minacham Balayla, here the word is not because of Chashad, right? It's Shrich and Shimur from what? Mazikim. Right? So that brings us back again to that Gemara that here on Gimel and Beis. What are the concerns that we have? The concern of Mem Gimel of going out alone at night was a concern about chshad for znus. And over there, the Gemara says, well, if somebody has, the Gemara made a distinction. That's only in a situation. It depends on the schedule. If everyone knows he has a chavrusa, there's no chshad znus, he can go out at night. But if he doesn't have a chavrusa, no one knows why he's going out at night. And it's a chshad znus. Here we're talking about a different situation. We're not talking about a situation of somebody going out at night in a situation where we're afraid of chnus. We're going out at night, we're afraid of mazikim. So you need shima for that. What is the response to that? Ultimately, we have a question. The Gemara tells about Bashaches that Rabbanan don't need to be watched. Right? So what do you mean? The Rabbanan don't need to be watched, and they don't have to be a certain part of the chain gangs to help build the walls of the city. So the Gemara tells us this is private notifications about going to the army and all this. We're not getting into that now. But for our purposes now, you look at Ben Yoina on Gima Omer Aleph and Brachot, right at the very beginning. Right, Rabbi Kiva points this out that if you look at the Ben Yoina, they're back in Gima Aleph, which we discussed back then. The Gemara there told us and about whether or not you have to say Shema. From Nachman said maybe you don't have to say Shema if you're Talmid Chacham. Abai says no, even in Talmid Chacham has to say at least one pasuk of Rachmanis. So over there, Rabbeinu Yonah says in the Divrei Maskil Shenemar. So Rabbeinu Yonah says Gimel Tzri Umaydam Minan here in our Gemara Gimel Tzrichan Shimur. Kol Lachai Chacham V'Chal V'Yeshem After Necham Alayla. Zeu Gishoyim Yichidi B'Ishoyin Laila V'Afela. So in other words, the Talmid Chacham who's going out at night to learn whatever, regular part of the night, he doesn't need it. When you understand this Gemara, how does it feel? The Gemara Babas, Rabbanan like Shichem Jerusalem, the Terasas Mishmartan, the Gemara Seit the Chav Aleph, a whole sugi over there, Torah Magnum Matz, all this. How do you fit this in with this idea the Talmid Chacham is not allowed to go out at night? So Ben Yana says this is talking about a situation of Kishaymei Yichidi Beisha and Laila Vafel. No, it's not going out at night to learn like normal, like 7, 8 o'clock. No, he got up middle of the night alone. It's like past Chatzais kind of thing, and he's going out then. Beisha and Laila Vafel. That's a situation where we say he needs shmira, but a sort of regular night going out, that would be no issue for Rabbeinu Yonah, and that's how you would be able to differentiate this Gemara here versus those Gemaras there, right? Which is not going to connect to the Gemara Mem Gim, which is a situation of Pshat. But in this situation of Mazikim and other types of Pranyas, you change it between the times of the night. That's how Rabbeinu Yonah would distinguish these Gemaras. Good? Fine. Continues the Gemara. Vam Rav Yehuda. Shlosh Advarim. Hamarach ben Marich Yonah Mishnayz Shalom. 3 things that if a person does them, they will be Marich Yom Mishnayz. One of them is a Marich B'Tfilah, someone davens a long time. A Marich HaShulchan, right? Somebody who stays a long time at the meal. A Marich Mesa Kisei, somebody who stays a long time in the bathroom. So the Gemara now goes through each one separately. A Marich B'Tfilah Ma'aluso, what? You're saying somebody who davens a long time is a good thing? As we turn the page to Nun Hayam and Aleph. So the Gemara says, but we know that call Marich B'Tfilah Ma'ayim B'Seif B'Ladei Karev Leif. That somebody who's Marich B'Tfilah a lot and is ma'ayin in the tefillah and expects his tefillah to come true, he's going to end up being very disappointed. He's going to end up being very bitter. So why are you saying that a marich b'tefillah is a wonderful thing? It's marichin yanam b'shnetza shalada. So the Gemara says shenemar techelas min moshech machal aleif. Somebody's moshech a lot is going to have a problem with the heart. Amar Rav Yitzchak shlosh dvar maskim avanesa shalada. And there are 3 things that bring up a person's sins. A wall that's falling, right? Somebody who's davening too much, davening too hard. Somebody who is a meiser to Shamayim. In other words, he's not meiser on earth, but he's meiser to the heavens. So the Gemara says, Holy Kasha. It's not a stira, but depends if he's ma'ayin or not ma'ayin. In other words, if somebody's just marich b'tfilasai and he doesn't expect his tefillas to come true, so then that's a wonderful thing. And if you're marich b'tfilasai, marich in yom v'shnayis. But if somebody's marich b'tfilasai and is ma'ayin, but in other words, he expects it to come about, so then he's going to end up being very unhappy. He's going to end up having koyev leif. If you look back The Gemara that we had in Lamed Beis. We discussed this topic once before. You remember the Gemara there in Lamed Beis? So over there we had um, the Rashi told him, if you expect your bakasha to come true, because you were very elongated tefillah, the seif and nasis, it's not going to happen. Him says and you were mamshach for nothing. And it's going to give you a bad, bad reaction. It's like you're waiting and waiting, hungering for something, and it's not happening. And if you look over there, Tais asked, Tais is over there, and call on Mayach b'tfilah, so Tais asked, a stira. But we know one of the things, but one of those things is what Ian tefillah. So you see, Ian tefillah is a wonderful thing. The Tais answer is machalik between the two types of Ian tefillah. The Ishlam says the trey Ian tefillah is two types of Ian tefillah. Ian tefillah, the hakam tabish tabak shazai. The type of Ian tefillah you expect what you're asking for to come true, in which case you're going to be terribly disappointed. But Ian tefillah, the hasam shemacham nesibul tefillah, and the Ian tefillah of Peah, which is the Ian tefillah that you are just having kavanah to daven and to daven some more. And just to daven, become like the Chasidim Arishanim. We talked about the Chasidim Arishanim in the beginning, right? Remember, of the fifth parak, the Gemara told us there about the Chasidim Arishanim, that they would, right? The Gemara explained that they would beforehand they waited an hour, they davened for an hour, and they waited afterwards for an hour. But they weren't expecting anything. Right? Remember, the Gemara also said that their needs were taken care of. Right? The Gemara said, all right, the Gemara said, Parnasam Heicham Mishtamaris. Right? So the Gemara said, Neishachasidim Heim, that the Terrasim Mishtamaris, right? Parnasam and Mizbarak, they basically were able to be davening 9 hours a day, and therefore they're able to, Parnasa was fine, and the what he called the Torah that they didn't learn was fine. They were able to remember Torah Mishnah Nasim was Misparach. It's fine. So that explains the same distinction that we have over here in the Gemara Nunei, like we saw over there in the Tais there on Lamed Beis. Fine. So now we mentioned again that if somebody's by a kir natu, if he's by a falling wall, right, that's a dangerous situation. And maskirun avanos of shalada, right? The idea that being in a certain place is maskir your avanos. Remember what this sounds like. This sounds like the Gemara to me. This is like if you're standing by a wall that's bending, right, or like going into one of these. Remember we said in the Gemara told us not to go to my playlist, right? It's not a good situation. So here we're saying if you're going to a wall that's falling over, you are essentially saying to the Ben Shalom, when you do something like this, you're going to check out your deeds. You're saying, this guy said, I can stand by a wall that's leaning over. I'm chilled. I know I'm in a good place. I'm a great guy. So then they say, upstairs, let's check it out. Let's see how good of a guy you really are. Remember the Gemara we had before on your test. The Gemara told us in Brachot on your test. Rish Lakish told us, a person shouldn't open his mouth to Satan. In other words, if you go stand by a wall that's a kir natu, a wall that's tipping over, you're saying, I'm chilled, I'm good, I know I'm great. So upstairs they say, let's double check. So don't stand by such a situation. That's what it means. You're basically egging them on. So Ian Tefillah and also Meiser didn't. Somebody he's not being a Meiser, in other words, to the government. He's being Meiser to heaven. He's saying, Hashem, get him. He did something bad to me, punish him. So the heaven says, let's think about it. Let's check his situation too. In other words, he wants us to punish this guy. Let's see how good of a guy he is. And then, of course, you may not end up in the place that you wanted if you're not as great as you thought. Okay, continues the Gemara. What should a person do in terms of his davening if he wants to, be ma'arich? He should daven a lot, but he shouldn't have the sort of the expectation that what his davening is going to end up with leading to any results. So we said there was three things that it makes a person have a good, good situation. Was marich and yom one was ma'arich b'tfilas, and one was marich al shulchanai. You should stay at the meal a long time. It doesn't mean that you're staying at the meal a long time. You should be smoozing and having a great grand old time. No, what does the Gemara say? Why does it mean Marach HaShulchan is a great thing? Because Dilma Aseh Aniyeh, maybe poor people are going to come, and you're going to give them food. If you already put away the meal, you have nothing left, so then you wouldn't give them anything. The Chsid HaMizbech ate Shalish Amas Gevaya. Right, the Mizbech was made of wood. It was 3 Amas high. Chsid Veidaber Elai Zeh HaShulchan. And later on, the pasuk says that it's talking about the Shulchan Asher Lifnei Hashem. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. It opened up talking about the Mizbech and ended up talking about the Shulchan. So here we end up a very famous pasuk, famous Gemara. Pasuk Mizbech was seen Shulchan. You open up the pasuk talking about the Mizbech. The Mizbech was 3 amas, and then you say this is the Shulchan. What do you mean this is the Shulchan? V'siyim b'Shulchan. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lezer, Amri Tarvayu. I always like to point out, and I probably did this already before. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lezer, Amri Tarvayu. Rabbi Yochanan was Rabbi Lezer's Rabbi. Rabbi Lezer was the Mar there. Rabbi Yochanan was his Rabbi. And Rabbi Yochanan, sometimes he got angry with Lezer for saying things without quoting Rabbi Yochanan. But sometimes we have that they say things together. Right? Like the Gemara in Yuma Testament base here as well. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lezer, Amri Tarvayu. Whatever you had the Beis Hamikdash would be able to help the Jewish people because you have them as back, which is bringing kapara. The Gemara told us that there were various things that brought kapara for the Jewish people. You had the Torahs, you had them as back, you had various things that brought kapara. But if you don't have them as back anymore, so what brings kapara? The shulchan is mechaper, the shulchan of a person. Their table in their house is like the mizbeach. That's why we know al kol kaban chatak of melach. Remember, we had that Taisus before, right? Taisus told us earlier that the reason that we are be putting salt on the table. I'm trying to find the Taisus now, but Taisus said that we put salt on the table because the table is like a mizbeach, and so therefore, as a result of that, we are able to ask for salt. That's not considered a hefsek in the meal, right? You're allowed to interrupt over there as a result of that, right? So I still haven't found the Tosfos. I thought it was right over here. Okay, I don't remember what it was. Those are the early memes. But anyway, that is what Taisa said. And again, this becomes a source also. It's a similar idea that we have for treating not to sit on the table, right? Because the table is considered like a mizbeach. These are all at this basis from this Gemara over here. So then the third thing that we said was that somebody who spends a long time in the bathroom, that's a great thing. So the Gemara says, somebody who stays in the bathroom for a long time, that's a wonderful thing. Furthermore, really, we said that there are 10 things that bring a person to sort of like hemorrhoids. Somebody who eats the leaves of the kanim, or from the grapes. Other parts of the grapevines, marige behema. Marige behema, I don't know what this means, but Rashi tells us it's like different parts of the animal, like if you eat the tongue or the stomach or the part of the intestines, they're all not healthy things to eat. The shedra shel dog, if you eat the fish's spine, I don't know how you can eat that, but okay. The dog maliach, if you have a fish, a dog maliach, but it's not salted and not cooked the right way. Somebody who drinks the dregs of the wine, the gross stuff at the bottom. Somebody who uses, they don't have Charmin toilet paper, so you use these kind of, terrible things to wipe oneself. Or use somebody else's stone that they use themselves. Rashi explains what does it mean. Somebody who sort of puts himself on his knees in the bathroom, which opens up his bowels, I guess, more than normal. So the Gemara says, so you see that. You're telling me that somebody who's married in the Beis Hakisei, it's a wonderful thing, but it sounds like here it's not a wonderful thing. So the Gemara says, like kash. It depends if you are staying a long time in the bathroom and you're putting yourself on your knees in this kind of manner, which would be bad, or you just stay in the bathroom a long time and you don't put yourself on your knees in this manner, in which case that's fine. It's a great thing. So the Gemara says, there was a woman, a Roman matron, who said, your face looks like those that raise pigs. and somebody who is a money lender, an investment banker. Why? Because Rashi tells us because they don't work very hard. Schar and Meruba, but they don't work very hard. They just lend out money. They just raise a bunch of pigs. Usmechem bechelkam, and they're very happy with their portion in the world. Lekach panem tzuvim. Therefore, their faces are so yellow. They're so ruddy. They're so delicious. It bothers me that Rashi used the lashon of panem tzuvim. Their faces are yellowed. It happens to be there's a Gemara full in Zion on the base, but the Gemara says Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoyer that he never took anything from anybody because one time he was maybe going to come to Rebbe's house. So Panav Shel Rebbe's faces became yellow. Okay, anyhow, so we have to move on. The Gemara says, so this woman tells Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, your face is so yellow and ruddy and beautiful because you look like you're a fat guy who's like, been raising the chazirim or being a good money lender. He says, no, it's not true. I'm also for you to raise pigs, and it's also to lend on ribbis. So I don't do either of these things. Ella, you want to know why my look so good? Ella asrim va'arba beis akise ikav meushpaiz l'bei midrasha. There's 24 different bathrooms between where I live and the base medrash. Whenever I go, I check in at every place. That should be always wonderful and in fantastic condition. And that's why, since I don't have any bathroom problems, that's why I'm feeling wonderful. This also reminds us of the Gemara that told us back in the beginning. Remember the people who thanked Hashem for various things. So one of them, the various different things that they thanked for, one of them was that they had a Beis HaKisei. And we ended up saying that was the greatest of all of them, right? The Gemara says, Le'is mitzoy zeh Beis HaKisei. The Gemara on Ches Amud Aleph. Aaron bar Rava, Hadamar Zutra Adifim Mikul. If you have a good bathroom, that's the best of all.